I'm Any New Province, and this week we're trying to find out if Cabal Paladin is possibly Pauper Playable. Cabal Paladin is a brand new finisher for a combo that already existed in the Pauper format. The combo that I'm talking about uses Battered Golem and Retraction, Helix, or Banishing Knack to return an artifact that costs 0 mana to your hand repeatedly and then recasting it for some kind of game-ending effect. Cabal Paladin can be that game-ending effect because it's a 4/2 for 3 and a black, and whenever you cast a historic spell, Cabal Paladin deals 2 damage to each opponent. There's 4 cards that we need to make this combo go off, so this shell was very hard to tune and test. I started with something very heavily Dimir with a lot of removal spells and things like that, but eventually I ended up coming back to this almost mono blue shell for Helix combo. I'm going to start by breaking down the combo itself. First, we have Battered Golem, which costs 3 mana for a 3/2, and it doesn't untap during your untap step. However, whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you may untap Battered Golem. When we're not using Battered Golem to combo off, we can use it as sort of an overcosted Nettle Sentinel. We have a lot of inexpensive artifacts to continuously untap it, and we even have artifact lands to make sure Battered Golem is always ready to attack. Ironically, our favorite 0-cost artifact doesn't actually cost 0 mana. It's Tooth of Chiss-Goria, and it costs 3 generic mana, but it has flash and affinity for artifacts, which means this spell costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control. You can tap it to give target creature +1/+0 until end of turn. Tooth is a really great free card to pick up with Battered Golem repeatedly because it turns what's usually a clunky 4-card combo into a 3-card one. Once Tooth of Chiss-Goria's cost is down to 0, we can repeatedly play it to give our Battered Golem +1/+0 with a Retraction, Helix, or Banishing Knack ability. This gives us an untapped Battered Golem with infinite power, and if we have an artifact land, we can just play that, use one last activation of Banishing Knack or Retraction Helix to bounce our opponent's last blocker out of the way and swing for lethal. Next, I'll go over the bounce spells that I've been talking about. Retraction, Helix, and Banishing Knack. They're exactly the same card. They cost 1 blue for an instant, and until end of turn, target creature gets tapped, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. With a combo that takes this many pieces to go off correctly, we need tons of card filtering and card advantage spells to make sure we get there before our opponent can disrupt us. Like most great card advantage and filtering packages, this one starts with Preordain. It costs 1 blue and it lets you scry 2, then draw a card. Next is Thoughtcast, which costs 4 and a blue to draw 2 cards, but it has affinity for artifacts like our Tooth of Chiss-Goria. Of course, we're hoping to cast our Thoughtcasts for a single blue mana, but we're not as heavy on artifacts as decks like Affinity. If I have to cast this as a divination, that's not even that bad. Finally, we have 2 copies of Gush, the real pull to being so close to mono blue with this deck. It costs 4 and a blue for an instant that says you may return 2 islands you control to their owner's hands rather than pay this spell's mana cost. Draw 2 cards. I'm so happy to be able to include a Gush here. It's just one of those cards that allows janky combo decks to get up to tier 1.5 or even tier 1 status. Next, I'll talk about the interaction I've chosen. A lot of it is very low to the ground because once the early game is through with, we can combo off at a moment's notice. Our first interactive spell is Disrupt. It costs 1 blue for an instant that counters target instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays 1. Draw a card. That part happens regardless of whether the spell is countered or not. I saw this card popping up in some mono blue Delver lists and blue black control lists not that long ago. I think it's so cool. It can catch your opponent's Ponder if you're on the play. It can catch Boros Monarch's first Prophetic Prism even if you're on the draw, and worst case scenario, you can just point it at any instant or sorcery spell to cycle and draw a card for 1 blue mana. Next, we have Counter Spell. Very simple. It costs blue and it counters target spell. I only have 2 counter spells here because we run a lot of artifact lands, making our blue mana a little harder to find sometimes. Finally, we have Prohibit, which costs 1 and a blue for an instant, and it has Kicker 2. You can find out what Kicker means by checking out last week's videos. Prohibit says counter target spell if its converted mana cost is 2 or less. That's pretty good. There's a lot of great spells in Pauper that cost 2 or less, but if this spell was kicked, counter that spell if its converted mana cost is 4 or less instead. This card is really great for keeping just about anything off of the battlefield except for an Ulamog's Crusher or a Gurmag Angler. I guess it can't hit Muldrifters, but hopefully we can combo off before our opponent opponent starts casting those. Every good combo deck needs a solid backup plan, and our solid backup plan starts with Ornithopter. It costs 0 mana for a Thopter with flying, and it's an 0/2. I think Ornithopter works best in this deck as another 0 mana artifact. You can combo off using it if you can't find a Tooth of Chiss-Goria, but it also synergizes really well with Tooth of Chiss-Goria if you don't find your Battered Golem or a Banishing Knack or something. And the other half of our backup plan and our last non-land card is Artificer's Assistant. It costs 1 blue for a 1/1 flyer, and whenever you cast a historic spell, you get to scry 1. Artificer's Assistant is really awesome for those weird cases where you have a Battered Golem and a Banishing Knack and an Ornithopter, but you can't find the rest of your combo pieces. You can use Banishing Knack to infinitely bounce the Ornithopter and scry to exactly the card you're looking for. Alright, let's talk about this mana base. First, we have 4 Ash Barrens, which have basic land cycling 1, which means you can pay 1 and discard it to search your library for any other basic land card. I think Ash Barrens works better than the other standard fetches in this deck because we'll often be leaving up mana, and also the black we're looking for is just a splash. Our only other non-basics are artifact lands. The first one we have is Darksteel Citadel, which is indestructible, just in case we run into mono black Ponza or something. It taps for a colorless mana. We're also running full playsets of the artifact lands in our colors, Seed of the Synod and Vault of Whispers. They tap for blue and black and make sure our thought casts are as cheap as they possibly can be. Finally, we have 7 basic islands and 1 basic swamp. We have tons of basic islands because we want to hit our Preordains on turn 1 or hit our Disrupt if we're on the draw and our opponent's trying to cast a Prophetic Prism, and also we need lots of islands to be picking up with our gushes. Alright, let's have a look at this sideboard. First, we have 2 Annuls for countering artifact spells out of Affinity or countering a pesky Pestilence. We have 2 Diabolic Edicts if our opponents are trying to boggle up. It's pretty easy on the black mana. We have 3 Relic of Progenituses for controlling our opponent's graveyards or just wiping them out if they're trying to get something back or cast a Mystical Teachings. We have 2 Shrivels if our opponent is going crazy with X1s. We don't mind throwing away an Artificer's Assistant with this. We have 2 Doomblades for catch-all removal spells if our opponent has a threat that just needs to be answered. We have 3 Hydroblasts for shoring up our red deck matchups, and we have a single Dispel for a more efficient counter against decks that use lots of instants. And there you have it, Helix combo a la Cabal Paladin. We're going to take this deck live into a league this Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Atlantic time at twitch.tv/AnyNewProvince. We're there every Tuesday night playing Possibly Pauper Playable decks. Before I go, I just want to remind you, you can like the video or subscribe to the channel down below. I'd seriously appreciate it. It's a great way to let me know you've enjoyed everything, and it really encourages me to keep making great Pauper content. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tech, and hopefully I'll see you on Tuesday night.